Hey again. Let's talk about water and sand dunes. I want to explore some of the techniques we currently have to create something like sand dunes, and in fact, typically I'm going to focus here on some of the ideas using water and wave movements. And just as a reminder, we do have a couple of ways to represent water, or some of the ways by which it manifests itself. There are some render. There's a render filter somewhere there. Forget where it is. No, these are water drops. There's a couple of there's bumpy toys. Some of these might occasionally be useful for something that's water or landscape like sand dunes. There is, well, the one I have right now here loaded right now is Water Ripples. That's in the animated category, so you need Howler for that. This will not be a menu you'll see in PD Artist. And so there's Water Caustics and Water Ripples. That one just goes ahead and renders, so it's a bit time consuming on a large image, on a slow system in particular. I'm gonna go make my image a little bit smaller for this, just so we can zip through this somewhat faster. 32 square, and let's create the animation from that. I'm gonna go with 40, not the default 30, but 40 frames. And let's go store this just in case we need to get quickly back to it. Store it in memory. It's not a big animation. We can use some memory, some RAM for that. And now let's see what happens when we go to this animated filter for ripples. All right, so that goes and renders that across. And okay, so we have an animation that's perhaps loopable. Yeah, it's going across. Looks like the last frame is even past the first frame again. If I go here and then go one more further, it zips back to the first frame. And it's almost like we could probably skip that last 1 or 2 frames. Let's go and delete this one and see what that does. Yeah, it's a little bit more loopable. Maybe one more. Yeah, you can still see a little hiccup at the end. Let's go delete this one. And then at some point you could also just do a make loopable. There's an option to do that where you can say fade out the last few frames and fade over the first few frames, right? So that's over here. When you look at the animation timeline, you right click that and you say make loopable. You see the same thing from the animation menu, and it's under the frames. These are the frame controls. So you have make loopable, and you can say how many frames you want to what's it right to sacrifice. You want to fade over from the 30th to the last 37, and so that makes the animation shorter, right? But it's now loopable, and you should see fading and not notice a hiccup so much. Right? So when you place over here, yeah, it still is a very quick transition. We only gave it about 5 or 7 frames to transition at the end. Still, it's better than the hiccup we had before. And the whole idea is that you will probably want to do that over a bit more than just 30 or 25 frames now, 24. What we want to do is, well, how does this relate to sand dunes? Well, this can be an elevation map, and we can have it then rendered in PuppyRay or 3D Designer. But especially with PuppyRay, it will be an interesting one to look at. Let's see what that does. Let me first store a copy of that and perhaps make it a little bit longer or a little bit slower. So I'm going to go right click on that timeline and look for a time stretch. And this one I'm going to do a simple like get back to about 40 or 45 right now, 45 frames with frame blending. So it's doing a little bit of an interpolation of the frames, and that will make it go a little bit slower. All right, so now I'm going to, well, let's store that one too. Why not? Yeah, store to memory. Don't need this one anymore. What I'm going to do now is go to the ray tracer or the ray caster, PuppyRay, GPU version. And in there, I don't want the water because the elevation map is going to be my this image is going, this animation is going to be my elevation map that's animating, and I want that to represent something like sand dunes. So I can do that in two ways. I can show the more option and hide the water. The water plane right now is a value noise. I can make it Perlin, but I can also make it disappear there, none. So now a refresh is showing no more water, and it looks a little bit more like sand dunes. All right, so that's an interesting approach to creating something like a wild sand dune look, sand Sahara deserts. We need to have a little bit more of a reddish tint for a couple of things. The sun is a little bit more on the yellowish. We probably want to have it more reddish. And certainly the sky as well. Well, let's see. Maybe the fog. Let's see the fog color. Let's make that a little bit more of kind of a brownish, something like that. And so now we looks like it looks a bit more like we have some sandstorms back there. We also need some skylighting. Right now, the sky is the bluish tint. That's okay, but it's not shining. Even if I turn it red, it's not shining onto the dark areas. We need that skylight enabled. So let's do global illumination. Bingo. Now we have the sky shining on us, and we can bring that up a little bit, and we have a brighter appearance even for the parts that are not hit by the sun. The sun is, where is it? Not this one, that's the one in the image background, but that's the one. There's the sun. We can make the sun a little bit brighter or bigger. Let's make it 55, and we can bring it up. That's this control here, move the light. Right? So now we have longer shadows or shorter shadows. And let's go back to rotate the camera. And let's say we want to just see this animated. Let's first render it in a better quality. Okay. It's a little bit pixelated here because it's a low resolution image. But remember, we did only, what, 256 squared or 5 something? No, not even that many. I think 200 or 300 squared. What we'll do next, though, is animate that. So let's make sure we have maybe even a little bit of extra pre-filtering for some more smoothing. And then illumination level, pretty bright. And okay, so now when we're ready to render this as an animation, there's two things that can animate. It's our parameters here in PuppyRay, but also the elevation map underneath it. All right, so that elevation map is this animation here right now. By the way, we are on the middle of this frame. We should probably not do that. Let's go call it done so we don't lose the current settings. Undo this, so that will restore the frame that we had here. Let's go back to the first frame. We will probably sacrifice one image when we're done with that. We might in fact just replicate this one. So let's do a plus to duplicate this frame. There you go. So the first and the second one are identical, and that's okay because we'll delete that first one. Let's make sure we are on the first frame. Let's go to filter again, transform PuppyRay GPU. We're still on the same render view. Let's do without anti-aliasing for now. So that's important when you have some more changes you want to make. Make sure you temporarily disable anti-aliasing. Otherwise, every move you do will take so many renders, like 6 right now. And on a slow system, that's just slowing you down unnecessarily. All right, so shadow quality. Let's bring this one up. Let's make it 11 or so. So then we get soft shadows. And we can render that. And okay, so now we are pretty much ready for the animation. We need to just have keyframes, and I don't necessarily need the camera or anything else to move. It's the elevation map that's going to move by itself. So if you want to just take one particular vantage point, maybe one where we see the sun there and nice reflection on the ground, maybe something like this, maybe even a little bit more wide angle, so we see a bit more of all that scenery. There you go, something like this, right? So now, maybe even tilt it, rotate it a little bit like that. Okay. All right, so now we're going to freeze that, create a keyframe, and then go to the end and create another keyframe at the same. If we don't want to change the view, we just want to see how the terrain is animated, we just need another keyframe at the very end in exactly the same setting. So now anywhere in between here, we shouldn't be seeing any movement, except the terrain should move. Why is the terrain not moving? Because it's not taking it from the animation unless we tell it to do so. Right? By default, it takes the current initial frame, and that's all it's using as the elevation map. Down here in the lower right corner, we have animate each frame. that's the option we need. So make sure you're at the very first frame, and then we animate each frame and read this, because the preview frame can corrupt, right? In this mode, we do have a couple of things to be aware of. One is that the rendering is going to be kind of permanently broken into it, and then as we go to the next frame, it's the next. So if we experiment with it and scrub through it, we might leave a trail of destruction here. And but on the other hand, now we see that if we go to the last frame, it is going to have an elevated, an animated terrain as we go through that. So let's go and well, we couldn't tell it because the last frame looks pretty much the same as the first frame, since we did that make loopable thing. But what we'll do is we'll enter alias, maybe give it even a little bit more, let's say 12 for the quality, and animate that. So now let's use the current settings and render. So now we see the first frame is a little bit odd, but then the other ones are good. Right, the first one is odd because it was already rendered, and it pulls it from that rendered stage before it re-renders. Now we have the same thing happening for each frame, but what it sees is that animated moving sand dune, or what was it, caustics, or wave ripples, water ripples. Right, so you end up seeing those patterns of sand dunes moving in a particular direction based on what that grayscale animation has to begin with. Now, once that's done, maybe you need to see the sand move in the opposite direction. We'll simply reverse the animation. Right, so let's see what we got here. We got a nice little animation. We have a first frame that we don't need, so let's go stop this one. Let's kill it, remove it, and then the very last one. That one's good. And let's see if we go from the last to the first. It continues nicely. So I think we still have a fairly loopable animation. Let's go and play it. Yeah, still pretty nice. All right, so that gives you an idea of what to explore with that way of creating some wacky sand dunes. There are other type of sand dunes, and we'll see some other techniques and other approaches to create something that might be interesting to use as sand dunes. This one here, we simply went to animated filter collection water ripples, and there's probably a whole lot more we can do. Maybe we'll take a look at caustics, and then of course the water that we see in Puppy Ray itself, that one also has animated waves, and we may be able to recover that as an elevation map as well to then use it for the terrain. Alright, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.